Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode, Jules and I review the Nikon F3, which is arguably the most legendary professional single-lens reflex camera for 35mm ever produced. The camera was first introduced in March 1980 and produced until 2001, which basically means that it was built 5 years longer than its successor F4, and it was still available to purchase in parallel to the F5, which of course was released years later. The F3 is also the camera that saw the most model variations of any Nikon F camera. So let's go back to 1980, and I have here a Time magazine from the time that features an original ad of the Nikon F3. So if you go through it, you see all sorts of ads kind of fitting the time. You see ads for alcoholic beverages, for luxury travel in certain airlines, for Seiko quartz watches, which was of course popular at the time. And then suddenly you see the Nikon F3. And what is interesting about this ad is that Nikon apparently was aware enough that many Nikon F2 shooters, so professional photographers, so little reason to upgrade at the time. So they integrated a subtle challenge to the ad copy, and I quote here, "For accomplished photographers, the uncompromising Nikon of yesterday is still here. The Nikon F3 is also a Nikon to grow with. Once and for all, here's a camera that makes sense for anyone because it thinks of everyone. Simply remarkable." And indeed, it was quickly embraced by journalists and many professional photographers and really became an incredible bestseller, which also explains why it was produced for such a long time. It really became a standard among professionals across various industries, from fashion photography to advertisement to even war reporting. And the latter is nicely illustrated in a much later ad that we have scanned here, that Jules was kind enough to scan, that highlights the different combat zones that this camera was used in, and at the same time that it was only repaired once in all these years. And speaking of reliability, a modified version of the camera was used by NASA in space during the space shuttle program, and until today the Nikon F3 is renowned for its reliable construction, the vast array of lenses and accessories that it can be used with, and the revolutionary design by the famous industrial designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, who was also responsible for later Nikon F cameras. The particular version that we have here is called the Nikon F3 HP, with the HP standing for high eye point, which is referring to the finder which we have here. The Nikon F3 is also prominently featured in all sorts of popular culture, like movies and TV shows and so on. For instance, here in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, it famously shows up being used by Sean Penn, the actor, using it with a normally incompatible 300mm f 2.8 AF SG lens. And Jules and I, of course, try to take it out and take it through its paces and make sure that we use it to its potential. So we used it, for instance, during a portrait session with the legendary 100mm f 2.8 lens and a winder to really make use of all the different accessories and how fast you can use the camera. Then we took it out on a trip to a mountain lake, shooting some zoom lenses and capturing some landscapes with slide film in that particular case, so some Kodak Ektachrome and even some Ilford Auto black and white film to really get out these tonal ranges of a typical landscape. And we also took it out for a regular photo walk and a rather wide angle lens and little varieties of lenses to show how it would perform here, shooting some Kodak Portra 160 rated at 100. So let's get started. what about the features and the build quality? The Nikon F3 consists of 1,165 pieces and is built to the highest standards. Its designer is the Italian star designer Giorgetto Giugiaro, who is famous for his car designs for Alfa Romeo, Fiat and Volkswagen, but later also designed some watches for Seiko, for instance. The design team focused on durability, reliability and compatibility with all sorts of accessories when they designed the new camera, and they started with wooden prototypes that very much resembled the earlier F2, as you can see here, and then they slowly developed in the direction that became the final F3 design that introduced all sorts of innovations but at the same time retained some features that made the F2 so successful. Most importantly, the focal plane shutter is made of titanium and supports speeds ranging from 1/2000th of a second to 8 seconds, and it works with an electronically controlled, the shutter is electronically controlled via a quartz oscillator which oscillates 32,768 times every second. And that means that shooting at 1/2000th of a second, it still oscillates 16 times within that time frame, which gives you an idea of the kind of accuracy that it produces. Next to a regular bulb mode, there's also a time mode, a T mode, which works mechanically, so without batteries, and in a similar vein, there's always a mechanical fallback with such a camera that in this case works at 1/60th of a second, so in case your batteries run dry, you can always revert to that and continue shooting. The flash sync speed is 1/80th of a second. The Nikon F3 arguably features one of the nicest shutter releases thanks to an electronically controlled swing mirror, and it also comes with very little mirror slap thanks to pneumatic dampeners within the mirror box. The light meter is integrated into the camera in this particular case and not in the finder anymore, which was a first for Nikon at the time. And the metering works with a circle with a 12mm diameter, which takes 80% of the reading. The mirror is actually pierced with 50,000 holes, which let through 8% of the light that is then directed to the light meter, which makes that reading possible. And the light meter is activated by pressing slightly on the shutter release button, and then it is turned on for the next 16 seconds and would then go off again. The viewfinder features a LCD, which was a true novelty at the time, and in the aperture priority mode it indicates the closest shutter speed, closest to the actual shutter speed that will be used or is determined by the quartz oscillator. And in the manual mode it shows a little M next to it to indicate that you are in the manual mode and remind you if you are in the manual mode accidentally, and then of course it just shows the selected shutter speed. There's also a small light that makes sure that the LCD can be seen in darker situations as well. The camera comes with new film guiding rods and a lower torque for the film transport thanks to a large number of axle bearings that were integrated into the film transport system. And in comparison to the F2, the F3 lets you shoot multiple exposures more easily thanks to a small switch here. And there's also a cable release connector with a screw thread. And last but not least, the quartz controlled self-timer goes off after 10 seconds and has some increasing blinks towards the end. What about the lenses and accessories? The Nikon F3 was completely rethought with the needs of professional photographers and their accessories in mind, and was really designed around making all these accessories possible, from finders to flashes to winders and all the things that you could potentially need. It's certainly available for the F3, or was made available in the course of its production time. The finders can be exchanged much easier and quicker in comparison to the F2, and here the standard finder already shows practically 100% of the image and is very compact and light, and the HP or high eye point finder, which we have here, is of course a little bit larger and heavier, and yet it lets you nicely see everything and all the information in the finder, even with a distance of 25 millimeters, which is great for shooting it with glasses, so either sunglasses or optical glasses, depending on your needs. It just works perfectly fine. And both the standard finder and the HP finder feature an integrated ocular shutter to protect the film from light in case of a longer exposure, so just to make sure that no light is coming in through that ocular here at the back. The F3 is compatible with all f-mount lenses, even AFD without the autofocus of course, and non-AI lenses can also be used, but in that case the reading is being taken at the selected aperture. So overall, this gives you access to a large variety of fantastic and legendary lenses. So for instance, the legendary portrait lens here, the 100mm f2.5 comes into play, for instance, which Jules kindly let me use for one of our portrait sessions here, and which creates phenomenal results. And you can see that across the board here, even the zoom lenses really live up to the professional expectations that you can have as a photographer. And it becomes apparent when using special film that really brings out high resolution and details, like the Ilford Orchard that we used, or the Kodak Ektachrome slide film in general, as you know, has a really nice and high resolution. And you see all the details here being coming to life thanks to these lenses here. So a really nice setup, and also combining it with T-grain film like we did here with the portrait session with the Delta 100 also works really nice. So overall, the accessories are phenomenal and live up to the expectations, and I particularly liked using the winder here, the MD4 winder that lets you shoot up to 5 frames per second, and it was a joy using it during the portrait session. So what about the handling and our personal impressions? The Nikon F3 is a remarkable camera, but what stands out the most is the incredibly clean and crisp shutter sound that really encourages you to take another shot, and what kind of adds to that feeling is the buttery smooth film advance that is such a joy to use. So after every shot you feel like, okay, I really want to take another shot and just advance it. And the only downside of using the winder is that this kind of film advance, the buttery smooth mechanism here and all the gears that you can hear turning is lost on you. And yet it's such a joy using that winder as well, and it turns the camera immediately in such a professional tool. And this versatility is so nice about the camera, that you can simply attach one piece here or a different lens and it immediately feels different. Overall, the camera offers a very nice premium feel. And what I particularly liked is the hand grip. It's the kind of camera that I can easily carry around just on the hand grip because it's so ergonomic and so intuitive, and it feels solid in your hands, and I would never fear to let it drop or anything. So it's the kind of camera that I could potentially use without a strap, and yet in real life use cases I would typically use it with it. Additional features such as the exposure compensation, the ISO dial, and even lifting up the film rewind all feature very smart and sometimes nicely hidden lock features to make sure that as a professional photographer, it never ever happens to you that you have a unique situation in front of you and you have some of your settings off accidentally. So this is fantastic about the camera, and even in the aperture priority mode, you have to press a button in the center of the shutter speed dial in order to transfer back into the manual mode. And as indicated earlier, then in the viewfinder you get the little M to remind you that you are in the manual mode. So all sorts of small hints and features that make sure that never ever you change a setting unintentionally, which is of course great for professionals, but also works nice for amateurs as well. The HP viewfinder is incredibly bright and a joy to use, and even wearing glasses like I often do, I could see every corner of the frame and could determine the sharpness and so on. And what is also nice is of course that you can change the focusing screens easily and have all sorts of focusing screens available depending on your preference. What I enjoyed most about the F3 is its versatility, and that it basically creates a different but fitting atmosphere depending on the attached lens and accessories. So shooting the portrait sessions here, shooting the portraits with the winder and the legendary 100mm lens, or also zoom wide angle lenses, I immediately felt like a 1980s fashion photographer. I got the speed, I got that agility, I got a compact camera where I could still feel all the stuff that is going on, the electronically controlled aperture, here shutter speeds, and the quick winder and all that I could feel. And then in the next moment we just used it very, very compact with a small wide angle lens and without a strap, just holding it without a winder, of course, just holding it on that hand grip, and suddenly you have a very compact, nice street shot combo that still gives you a nice professional feel. And then the next moment we are photographing a mountain lake with a incredible 80 to 200mm lens that immediately makes you feel like a wildlife photographer taken out of the 90s, and you're shooting Kodak Ektachrome, and it just feels amazing to expose these lights. So to me it feels immediately less amateurish and, for lack of a better word, and more serious when shooting the Nikon F3, and this turns it into such a special camera when it comes to our personal impressions. So overall, a fantastic camera. Of course, when looking at the market, please make sure to get one in good condition. Of course, these were heavily used in many cases, but it's still possible to find some that are just relatively recent in terms of their serial number and when they were built. So towards the end, in the late 90s or even early 2000s, that is still possible to find. And then of course, if you find one that hasn't been heavily used, it's such a joy, and the reliability and durability speak for themselves. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Analog Insights and our review of the Nikon F3, a camera that set the benchmark for many future cameras but is still a joy to use today. It's the kind of camera that turns every shot, regardless of what you're shooting, into a professional moment. You kind of feel all the quality and engineering expertise that went into it. Overall, it's a remarkable camera and it's a legend for a good reason, in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please remember to like it and maybe even share it with your friends. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.